Live streaming is on.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the 123rd meeting of the Extinctionati. Today is the 6th of November 2022. How many years do we have left? Today's topic, we're going to sort of kick off with a bit of a discussion about whether people like Greta and Roger are sort of leading people down the garden path with false hope about the predicament of humanity and the planet Earth. Do you want to give some opening comments going south?
Yeah, I can take it. I'm just going to check that we are actually broadcasting to the internet.
Oh, you better be. I did such a nice introduction.
Yeah, no, we're going. We're just going under the false number from last time, 122. So, but that's okay. Okay, yeah. So we had the question that you alluded to, and the full. I guess the full question is whether it's evil to induce false hope in people, and it's connected to activism like Fridays for Future with Greta Thunberg, and also Just Stop Oil and Insolent Britain and Extinction Rebellion with the strongman Roger Hallam, and it's kind of a multi-layered and complex problem or a question, because the first thing I think is that as you said once, Bob, the hope is contextual. The question of giving people hope or having hope is dependent on what context we are talking about and what kind of hope. I think there is good hope, and then there is false hope, and giving people the false hope that if you just sit down in the motorway and demand action from the government, then the climate crisis will end at some stage, or we will all be saved. I'm not saying that anyone actually believes that, but it's kind of the way that it's being received by the larger population. That okay, if these guys are doing this and sitting down in the road and people are taking free from school every Friday to demonstrate with the Greta crowd, then that's kind of giving everybody hope, even though, for instance, Greta is very against people pointing to the youth and saying that, we don't have to do anything, we can just look at the youth activists and they give us hope. She really hates that. That's why she said, "How dare you?" So I'm kind of rambling a bit because I haven't written these things down, but I think I remember that there is a way in which even people from our cult or our group could, in theory, go join the climate activists. We could, in theory, go and sit down with them in the motorway or carry their banners and join their clique and join their activism. And we could do it without buying into the illusion that it's going to actually solve the climate problem. We can do it and still retain a different philosophy. For instance, my philosophy, which is that we are fighting this battle together with okay, yeah, we are fighting this battle together with Mother Earth, and it's not a battle for greening civilization or for making civilization persist in a fake green way or a semi-green way, but it's a fight with the planet in order to do away with civilization, which is the thing that is actually messing up all the biospheres and all the ecosystems of the planet, all the forests and everything. So we can actually join these activist groups, and that will also maybe be easier on our hearts, because it's kind of hard to go on in your daily life and pretend that everything is, everything is tip top functioning. So sort of to put our action where our hearts are, because we do actually care about the planet and the climate. And then we can join and be with other people who feel the same, but without sort of going over to the naive thinking, where you think what you're doing is actually going to solve the situation. So that's that, and people are streaming into this stream. That's very good. Yeah, so I think there are a number of different other sides to this. For instance, by sitting in the road and doing these protests that they're doing in England and increasingly in Europe and America, about connected to the climate, they are communicating with the rest of the planet and population that there is a big issue about climate and the eco crisis. So even people who are not participating in the demonstrations, they are getting the jive or the message that, okay, this is something people are really turned on about and engaged by.
Yeah, can I just jump in there going
yeah,
forward?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, Mick Daly here. So obviously I've got an Irish accent, so I'm Irish. But I ran into a fella recently about this thing about this activism and sitting in the road stuff or equivalent. So I met a guy. He was the first guy interviewed by on what is it? Post Doom by Michael Dowd. His name is Sean Chamberlain. And I actually ran into him in the countryside in Ireland. He is kind of a place there, but he's originally from the UK. And basically, he was telling me about some guy who was doing some protest. I can't remember what was the context, but basically someone asked him why he was doing it. You know, he was just wasting his time. But basically the explanation that the guy that was doing the protesting was that he wasn't doing it for society or saving anyone. He was doing it for his own integrity. So maybe that can be part of it, even though I agree with you on the hopium thing that some of these things are based on a false premise of that we can actually save something. But at the same time, maybe for some people, it's to keep their own sanity or sense of right direction or right cause. I leave that with you.
Absolutely. And I was going to say something more about hope. And for me personally, what I'm hoping for, after I figured out I do actually need to have some hope. I can't live totally hope-free. So for me, hope lies with the planet being green, actually green with the forests and stuff after this artificial civilization has collapsed. So what I'm hoping for is that we don't let it linger all the way until everything is irrevocably destroyed. That nature can, jump back and flourish and continue evolving and filling all the destroyed places, all the concrete deserts, and even allow for some humans to skulk about. So I think we need to have our hope, but our hope doesn't have to be the same and the exact same hope as some of the young activists who actually think that Ursula von der Leyen, etc., are going to do one single thing to stop the destruction.
Yeah. So I think that this issue of hope, which I came across, well, that Derek Jensen's original thoughts on the matter, and then it becomes this like toxic word. But obviously, yeah, the idea of hope being in the context of hopium, hoping for something, either something that can't happen, or hoping for something that if it does happen, it's the same problem. So I guess, yeah, the false hope is the thing. Yeah, to eliminate the notion of hope altogether is kind of trite, because you could sort of hope you wake up in the morning. That's not such a terrible thing. And if you're like, got half a brain, you realize that there's a possibility you're not gonna wake up in the morning, and you might not spend a lot of time thinking about that, but you might think, oh, I hope I wake up tomorrow morning. And you're not really creating any sort of toxic state of mind or delusion in hoping something like that. So yeah, with this whole scenario, or predicament, I think is the word we're supposed to be using, which I quite like. In the predicament of the collapse of the ecosystem, I hope that some shit can happen that makes it less worse. And I don't know even how to articulate what in actuality that might be, but I hope that certain less worse outcomes are possible. I don't know if I hope anything like in terms of humanity as such. I guess I hope there's some prospect for humanity to survive, but I guess I'm ambivalent about how much I hope for that. I feel slightly indifferent to humanity specifically, and I suppose I hope that life survives on this planet, and I'm not really scientifically qualified to say if it's legitimately something that, whether we're going to possibly see or not see, but whether the events that occur are going to include possibly cessation of life on the planet. But I hope life stays here and evolves, and not everything dies, because that just seems kind of stupid for the sake of an iPhone. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, why not hope those things? But I think that the element of hope that kind of gets the blood boiling is all these people that hope that wind and solar is going to take over from fossil fuels and everything can continue as usual, and people that hope that the population can rise until we've got 12 billion or 15 billion souls on the planet, and people that hope that nuclear power is going to take over, and all of those sort of hopes that are hoping that the scenario that we're in is just going to get increasingly worse. And so those people hoping those things either just haven't researched the topic very well, or they're in a sort of horrible state of denial. But, you know, again, it comes back to my favorite set of analogies, which is I hope that when I'm standing in the queue for the shower, that it is indeed a shower, and I'm not going to hear the hissing of a gas canister being, you know, released. That's sort of, you know, there's that, and I don't know what, you know, I don't know what I think about that particular hope. I suppose once you're in the queue, and it comes down to the issue of denialism and self-delusion, which is, I feel like I say the same stuff all the time, but I think it's the primary feature of human beings is the ability to just pretend that reality isn't, and being able to balance the possibility that, you know, my perceptions of reality through my senses are somewhat limited, and my ability to know about the world that I'm in is limited, but at the same time, constructing completely artificial realities can't be a good thing. So with the denialism, the kind of hope that plays into that, that's the bad thing. That's the thing that I'm scared about. And talking about these protesters, so in London now, there's a lot of stuff, and I've kind of, although I live on the fringes of London, I sort of isolate myself somewhat from the results of these protests and so on, because I don't go into central London, I don't drive a car, and so on and so forth. So I'm not directly affected. So it might be easy for me to say, but whenever I see people, you know, closing that bridge over the Thames, or the people sitting in the middle of the road and so on, I'm with them, and I feel very nervous to look at the very aggressive response of people who are starting to act increasingly violently towards those people. And it doesn't signal to me that there's going to be a sort of a likely evolution of this, the sort of general human perception of this predicament, to seeing that, you know, the general public are going to start to understand what's going on, as far as we believe that's what's going on. So yeah, the hope, I sort of, and again, I don't even know if I hope, I was going to say I hope people start to understand what's going on, but I'm not even sure if that's a good idea, because maybe if people start understanding what's going on, they're all going to just panic and sort of murder each other or jump off a cliff.
Yeah, I think I agree with MD, Nick, about, you know, doing what your heart tells you to do, if not for anything else, and then for your sanity. And I also think that hope is kind of a neighbor to trust or naivete. And when it comes to evil, I think it's unfair to call somebody like Greta or Roger Hallam evil for deluding deluding the people. I think it's much closer to something like the climate panel, I think, and certain climate scientists. An example is that they keep telling us that, yeah, we can just stop emitting, or what do you say? I think they actually, when they say stop emitting carbon, I think they're saying that we should stop increasing the yearly emissions of carbon. But they're basically saying that, yeah, we can stop increasing the carbon emissions in 2030, and then because we were so clever or so good to stop the increase, then as a thank you from the planet, she will just stop warming the planet, stop warming the climate the same year, more or less. That's a level of lies that they're serving us, and the climate panel IPCC have been doing this like since I was 16, since 1988 or thereabouts. So, and that's a much more, you know, that's a grown-up, established globalist kind of evil, and lying, where they told the youth of the 1980s that we're on it, we're on to the problem, we're going to solve it for you, and instead of solving anything, they just have been administering a global civilization that has just kept increasing all the destruction and emissions and everything year by year. I'm sure everybody here has seen the graph of the COP climate meetings, from 1 to 27 or something on a graph, and it's the graph is together with the carbon contents of the atmosphere, the CO2 levels of the atmosphere, and it's very clear that not a single conference of the parties or COP meeting has ever even dented the crazy curve of CO2 in the atmosphere. So, why should we even go to Egypt and have another conference there? And then I just want to credit Greta for saying that she's not going to Egypt. There's no point in going to the COP27 here in November. And she would rather spend her activism days elsewhere. I will shut up now.
Yeah, I definitely think that Hallam and Greta are heroic figures who are saying stuff that's very difficult to say in public. Yeah, I mean, I find in like direct interactions with people the impossibility of saying anything about the climate predicament or the pollution and civilization. I mean, civilization, there's another thing. I mean, you really can't bring the subject up in any company, and it astonishes me how I mean, still, why does it still astonish me? I don't really fucking know. I'm still astonished by and again, this is why I love those protester guys, because like you can't say anything about any of these subjects, and I feel like I'm letting the side down because I don't make a big enough noise about this stuff, although it feels kind of suicidal. And part of the reason is because I've been used to being like a very fringe person all of my life, and I've experienced living in already a fascist society. And it's extremely dangerous when you give your opinion on anything. And I got used to basically projecting a slightly kind of unhinged personality, which is a way of kind of surviving, having a different perspective on things. And people think, oh yeah, that's the village idiot, or this guy's a bit crazy or whatever. And now you've got this sort of phenomenon where the sort of nice middle-class white people are taking it upon themselves to express what's a contrary view, and you've got, it's like the straight people are being attacked now, for being poncy white middle-class people who just want to, I don't know, fuck everybody's day up for no good reason by sitting in the road. Again, I feel like I'm rambling, but so listening to Roger Hallam, I mean, I've listened to so many of his talks that for many years he has been unashamedly direct about what he thinks the predicament of the planet is. And I think that there are times when he presents a sort of optimistic outlook on what a degree of agency for the human society has maybe in dealing with this issue. But I think being sort of like optimistic, you're just forced into that position, really. So if you're going to already be a very public speaker, I mean, whatever, my minimal like participation in even like some social media or whatever, if you go out and say, oh yeah, this is very serious, or windmills and solar, I mean, I find myself keep saying, oh, windmills and solar are not going to help anything, they're just prolonging the problem. And you get viciously attacked from all angles. And I don't know this, and again, Greta being someone who's definitely has social issues and so on, I think they're really heroes, those people.
Can I just interject there? Like you mentioned about agency. I mean, so you have basically the different types of people. You have the deniers, you have the ignorant, you have the non-active activists, and you've got the active activists, and then you have the doomers, that are gone beyond it, that we're living in a time of dying. But like, is there not an alternative of agency in a time of dying, of maybe, as Going South mentioned earlier, about ending up with a green planet somehow, and somehow some humans that have obviously kept themselves informed of the situation can respond in that direction of a future planet like that, rather than just because say I don't want to mention his name, but the Guy McPherson thing of just that we're all going extinct within so many years, and that type of acceptance means you do nothing as well. So, like, is there some agency in the middle between what's the active activist in the road sitting in the road at the moment, trying to convert the existing civilization into a new civilization, and there's on the far side of that, there's we're going extinct, and then there's in the middle, we might end up with a green planet in 50 to 100 years with some people left with that type of mentality.
Yeah, I think there is a very good example of a third option, which what's his name again? Deep Green Resistance.
Derek Jensen.
Derek Jensen. Yeah, thanks. Because they are talking about saving this local river. Like recently we've heard about both Ireland and Scotland. I think that the salmon are totally gone from one year to another from local rivers, and the kind of activism that you could do is, instead of going to the M5 or some motorway down south in England, you could adopt the river, adopt the creek, adopt a beautiful glen or forest or something in your country or where you live, and just make sure in some hardcore way that this thing is kept free from developments, is not destroyed, and that it could perhaps make it through the industrial collapse and come out on the other side as a still functioning salmon river or a forest where you could hunt, or still being nature. I mean, so there are many ways you can do. You've also got the unmentionable forms of activism that we can't talk about on the stream, but more like monkey wrenching and stuff, sabotage. But I think we also have to mention today, because today a certain Englishman, David Icke, was scheduled to talk on the dam square in Amsterdam on a peace rally, and he was actually going to talk about tyranny and repression and growing fascism in Europe and America and Australia and around the world. And he was actually denied access or entry to Netherlands, and at the same time he was denied entry to all 26 EU or Schengen countries for 2 years, just to keep him away from his 30-minute spot at the peace rally in Amsterdam. And I mention it because I think it's important and also relevant to XR and stuff, because other than just the planet surviving or the ecosystem surviving civilization for 10,000 years, you and I, or we sitting here on this talk, we also want to live in a non-tyrannical and non-fascist human society for the last years, while we have human societies, and therefore I think it's very important to also think about forms of activism that are anti-fascist, really anti-fascist, not just in words, that are pro-freedom and also solidaric to, let's say, farmers in the Netherlands who are squeezed out of their farms and being taken out of business so that the huge landowners like Bill Gates and stuff is going to sell food to everybody instead. I think there's a lot of things that you can actually do as an activist to make things better while we have a civilization, and fight the good fight if you can and if you have the energy for it. I find myself, if I were to be punished in the same way as David has been this week, then I wouldn't even be able to go back to Norway and visit my family for 2 years. I mean, that's not a democracy in my view.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, as an EU citizen outside of Schengen, but actually living in Schengen, I mean, this is totally undemocratic. I saw a bit about it earlier. I saw a quick interview he gave today a few hours ago, and he was quite emotional at the start of it. But he did say he did get into his rhythm of what he wanted to say by the end of it, and quite a lot of it made sense. Even if I don't agree with everything he comes out with, he should still be allowed to speak freely in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely, and the charges against him are just ludicrous. It's what they throw against anyone who they don't want to speak.
What's he been accused of?
No, the immediate reason he's blocked from 26 countries is that he was going to talk. He was invited to Amsterdam, so that's why they did it right now. But here the accusations are the same that you were served with Bob a couple of weeks ago. So clearly, if you are against the lizard people ruling the planet, then you are against the Holy Tribe, in Jerusalem. So,
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That's a very handy one, isn't it? And it's that's being used for everything, I guess. I like David Icke. I'm a big fan of his. I don't take his narratives literally. Well, I suppose I could be persuaded to, I suppose, if I had a big bifter. But what is it about him? I mean, he's basically has this like insight where he knows everything that's going on, and he sees it in this poetic. He's telling us this poetic story that does accurately describe the world, in the same sense that sci-fi movies or fantasy movies, when we watch The Lord of the Rings or something, we don't feel that it's a historic representation of any kind of period on planet Earth, but we kind of connect with that on some level because it gives us an understanding of life in some way. That's why we like these things, if you like that sort of thing. Similarly with Star Trek, if you like Star Trek, nobody thinks that there's anybody flying around in a spaceship doing whatever, talking to a machine that gives them a cup of hot chocolate. But we connect with the stories because they reflect something to us about how we perceive our lives and society and so on. And I think David Icke is doing that as well. And again, I mean, that there is a certain narrative about David Icke that he's a controlled opposition, or he's a sort of honeypot for people who have strange beliefs, and then they get all the people with strange beliefs to go and sign up to a mailing list, or go and see a show at Wembley Stadium or Wembley Arena or whatever, and then the deep state can put you on a list because you've shown an interest in those topics. And that might also be true. I don't know, but I don't know. There's a sort of yeah, maybe it's just because of the Terry Wogan thing when he originally sort of went a bit loopy and did all that sort of I am the son of God stuff that he went on telly and did back in the day, and he was sort of jeered at. Maybe just being a witness to that made me very sympathetic to him, and the fact that he sort of persisted against the social sort of stream of, and I'm sort of taking it from a perspective that the average human being is basically those the kind of peasants with pitchforks that you saw in like the old Frankenstein or Dracula movies, and you had these sort of like irate characters, wanting to hunt the monster or whatever they perceived, and the modern iteration of that was when oh God, what was it? You got this sort of anti child molester type of protests in the UK, where they'd attack a pediatrician's office, and you basically got the braying peasantry, and that's what most people are like, and they scare the shit out of me, to be honest. And so someone like David Icke, and again, I don't want to sort of I'll compare. I think there is a sort of level of comparison between someone like David Icke and someone like Greta Thunberg and someone like Roger Hallam and any of the people who sort of speak out about these things, that are willing to sort of be flayed in the town square for telling the truth. And yeah, because I've been flayed on a very minor level for saying stuff. And it's not, I don't think I'd be brave enough to just do more of it after being flayed. When I get flayed, I tend to crouch under the desk.
Yeah. But Bob, just one point on what you said about what David Icke said with Terry Wogan. Like, I think his message about the Son of God is that basically we're all the sons, daughters of God. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
Basically, God is Mother Earth. So
yeah, I mean that, yeah, I was sort of being slightly flippant, so thanks for pointing that out. But no, I mean, just in terms of like the fact that that Icke had been sort of set up to be jeered at, and the audience kind of was braying at him, and that he was driven off the show, and it was just that sort of the spectacle of a sort of the mainstream consensus, the people who sort of toe the party line, turning around and all pointing and making donkey noises at the person who's trying to present a different perspective on things, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Good. Thanks for pointing that out.
I mean, at the time, it was so far out what he was saying, about consciousness and all this, then, people just hadn't come across that before. But now in the modern age with the internet and YouTube and all that, people have heard or have had a lot more immersion in these things and further possibilities. But I just want to come back to the point about given the fact that he's been banned, like, in terms of the context of the conversation today, which is to do with hope. That just shows that the not civilization, what's the establishment? There's no hope in the establishment, given this type of reaction to someone who just speaks out against them. Because it's basically
I think it shows. I think it shows that they are very, very afraid. Because as Bob said, David is presenting a narrative which is anti-establishment and pro-freedom and against the European power and stuff. So I think they're very, very scared of him, and they're also really, really stupid because if he had gone to Amsterdam, maybe 2,000 people at the dam would have heard him or listened to him. But now his story is going around the world, and he recorded the 30-minute speech at Dover or at the Eurotunnel or something about him not being allowed, but he delivered it anyway on YouTube, and it was read at it was played at the event in Amsterdam. I also want to mention the XR, the relevant thing about XR, because he said in his interview that in the last couple of days it's been announced that the Extinction Rebellion, I think in London, maybe in Amsterdam, we're going to hold an anti-David Icke demo. So that's kind of a very scary development, I think. I'm aware that Roger Hallam has left XR, and what you do have now in XR is kind of the more or less normies, and they believe whatever the government tells them. But it goes into a pattern that we saw in Germany, where the Green Party celebrated the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline because they were so against it, because Putin is 100% mad and a bad guy, and the Green Party is sort of a autistic black or white thinker that says no, gas is bad, fossil fuels are bad, so therefore just let everybody freeze to death in Germany this winter. So they were actually celebrating a terror attack on the key European energy infrastructure, which was this pipeline, which had been delivering gas since 2011 from St. Petersburg or thereabouts. So I think we're now seeing sort of the end point of the normification of Extinction Rebellion, where you have these, what do you call it, day trippers, these casual activists who are sort of not into the mindset of the situation at all. They're just like, oh yeah, no, we don't like David because he's already a pariah, so we will add to his injury or add to his ostracism or something by staging an anti-David demo. It's like, it sounds like like an anti-Bob demo, Bob, or an anti-Torstein demo in the capital city. They kind of forgotten what they were about. But of course, they are jumping onto the point about David saying that climate change is a hoax. So that's kind of their angle. But I'm less worried about David saying it's a hoax, because in many ways the official societal response to climate change is more or less a hoax.
It's the same. Right? Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's the least worst thing that It's all a fucking hoax, isn't it?
Well, I gotta say, just to chime in, first, thanks everyone for being here. And Bob, I really like a lot of the things you were saying before about hope and whatnot. My awareness of David Icke is minimal. I don't have a lot of awareness about his role or, how he's impacted politics in European society. But I think that there's some real
no impact on politics. Sorry.
Well, that's good, perhaps, or bad. I don't know. But, the theme today, of course, is talking a bit about hope. And I'm not a big fan of hope. I'm very mindful of what Mick said earlier about needing some sense of hope. This can be understood in any number of ways, of course, right? Like, any person's definition of hope is, it's personal and maybe different. But I do see hope as a delusion that can lead us to bad outcomes. And it can lead us to bad outcomes in a couple of different ways. One way is by chasing a goal. that is actually bad because you are failing to kind of acknowledge the reality around that goal. That's what I see a lot about climate change. And also deluding yourself about the impacts of your own actions. And that's one of the risks. So, just bringing this back to David Icke, we just described a situation where a group like XR, a sort of cult, has risen up and, heterogenized itself, has separated itself from the general public. And under the power and steam of this cult, it's drifted from its own purpose, its own design. And, I want to kind of paint a brief picture where this David Icke thing can result in exactly the same kind of problem, unfortunately. I see a problem with lionizing any figure like David Icke or any leaders of XR and holding them above their impacts and roles in society as being separate or different or heroic compared to us. I think that the discussion of goals earlier is fantastic. We want to have a planet that is alive, that has some kind of green life on it, hopefully after all this blows over. And I think it's really important, to then define a goal, how we do that here in society. We want to do it in a non-fascistic way. We want to do it in a non-managed extinction, as Hugh would typically point out. Now, this is a challenge. There's threats on both sides here, Now, somebody like David Icke being banned from Europe, is undeniably bad, but we got to worry about the alternatives. There's allegations of anti-Semitism. And, my worry is that his words are taken beyond his meaning, or, his influence and the group he builds around him is removed from his control and is wielded in ways that are bad, ways that may hurt people. To the degree it fuels antisocial behavior like anti-Semitism, we ought to be really concerned, because that cuts against our ability to create a non-fascistic future. The actions of XR as they glue themselves to whatever, we ought to be worried. They ought to be worried about how that's being consumed by the right and used to fuel their rise. They need an opposition force in order to rise against that situation. That's how reactionary forces work. But, on the other hand, we have to be really careful which direction the movement is pointing to. It can't, as everyone I think believes, can't just point to clean energy as being a solution, but more of a non-fascistic approach to preserving what life we can on this planet. So I'm worried about David Icke in both directions here, and how his movement may be used to separate us, against his own interests. So I just wanted to put that in.
Maybe I can fill in with some European perspective, because I've been following the Netherlands situation with the farmers' protests and the anti-COVID lockdown protests, etc., for the past years. And I think what the Dutch government are so pissing their pants about is that there is actually an explosive situation in Netherlands right now, and that's because people are waking up to the semi-fascist rulers of that country, where they are actually shooting at farmers sitting in tractors, peaceful farmers, shooting them without them even having a weapon. The police are doing, and there is an explosive situation where people burnt down COVID testing centers in Netherlands. So in a way, I think you can just forget about the anti-Semitism thing. That is not going to trigger things again in Europe. That's totally not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's just a scare tactic from the governments. They're very afraid of David, because he has a narrative. He has a way of piecing these pieces together to form a grim picture of the government being your enemy. And I won't say that's yes or no to that, but that's what he's doing. and maybe this is just his moment where he could actually cause riots in Amsterdam and in Netherlands and in Germany, etc. That he could be the trigger for that, but that would not be a pogrom. It wouldn't be another anti-Jewish thing. It would be an anti-European government thing, and it's not like everybody in government are from the tribe, right? So that was what the other thing you mentioned was. What was that? Oh, I'll hang up for a moment.
I'd like to, because I don't think that there is an anti-Semitism issue, and at this point, anti-Semitism has been completely co-opted in the service of the Israeli state. And if anything, the Jewish sort of general public Jewish person is being used as sort of a type of cannon fodder for the Israeli state. And anti-Semitism is just a club to beat people with. Now, I'd like to qualify that I don't know to what extent David Icke might be anti-Semitic, and whether the lizard thing is a secret code, whatever, a dog whistle thing. I don't know whether I haven't read any of. I read some of David Icke's like very earliest books, and they weren't really. They were all just sort of spiritual woo-woo stuff that you'd see in any kind of New Age literature. And I know that there's more sort of elaborate sort of descriptions in modern times about this, that, and the other, who's controlling the world, and so on. And so I don't want to say that there isn't such a thing as a irrational hatred of Jews. That doesn't exist. Obviously, it exists, and in the past that has caused some problems for people, including my grandparents. But it's not a thing like in Europe. And again, okay, I'll qualify that there's maybe like Hungary, I think, is got some, some countries in Europe have various issues, and basically all white European people are racist to some degree or other. But it's just not, I don't think the Jewish community is in any way at risk in Europe of irrational hatred being directed towards them. They're a very wealthy community. They do have economic power and influence beyond the size of their community in Europe. That's just a real fact. And that's, if you went to dinner with any Jewish family, they'll all sit around joking about how we own the media and we're in politics and all of this, right? So that's okay. That's the reality. There are lots of other communities that are legitimately at risk of racism. And I think that the Jewish community should just they're not going to, obviously, but they should sort of keep a lid on it, right? As in, there's other people with bigger problems. There are other issues in the world now as to whether or not someone makes some sort of a slur or whatever. And again, this is all about defending the rights of the state of Israel to pursue its fascistic agenda. And that's what anti-Semitism is about. That's all it is. And it's this implication, which is in itself is an anti-Semitic proposition, which is that all Jewish people somehow are affiliated to the state of Israel. And
but I think you're taking it a bit, too personal.
Yeah, I do. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. No, but the very relevant thing here is that lately they are using the club, what you call it, or the hammer, to beat everybody who talks about the globalists. There are no globalists according to them, according to the globalists, and they made this very clever trick where they have they have claimed that everybody who criticizes globalism or globalists or whatever, that they are that is some kind of dog whistle for the tribe, and that's that's a way to take a guy like David Icke, because he's angry at the globalists, and he's always been. But he's actually talking about the people who are running the world, like Bill Gates and stuff. He's not ethnically focused on the tribe or anyone. It's just a fact that there are people running the world who care very little about normal people in their countries. They care about their globalist friends in other countries, like Justin Trudeau and everybody.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, this is the nature of the system that we're dealing with. It makes things very fragile. It's put the situation about, are we going to fall into fascism or not? It's a game of brinksmanship that's made it very precarious, where any of these powerful actors could come by and push it one direction or the other, and we just have to watch out as stuff falls down, it doesn't crush us.
I mean, we live in a
for
fascist
example-
society already.
Oh yeah,
We are in
absolutely.
a fascist society.
And the question is then, how is it that you maintain control, extend it, keep that going, as opposed to having, people emerge under their own economics and liberty. But, I fully agree with the way the state of Israel is behaving. It's abhorrent. It's terrible. And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
would
go
also
ahead.
say, though, that, here in the States, anti-Semitism is live and it's real. It's a threat to people. And the trick is, with messages like global, at least from a perspective of the States, like I just think about the Pittsburgh shooting at a synagogue some 4 years ago, just god awful, so terrible. But I just think about the nature of this. We can't win a messaging war. David Icke can't even win a messaging war because he doesn't control his own message. That's something that is in the hands of how he's portrayed by governments and media and by folks in the elite. It's just not something that's going to happen. But if I was David Icke, there's just so much care to be taken in sticking your neck out and in creating some kind of movement, either to protect you or in the focus of his writing. The way that can be manipulated and abused is amazing. It's just so fragile. And so when I think about people doing this kind of thing, I just feel like it's so important to kind of look at the endpoints of your efforts. Do they match your goals? And, I have no criticism or awareness of his role, but man, I just don't think this thing is headed the right way. So I would want to duck out.
Yeah, but that's like you've got the sort of the nutty, eccentric uncle who tells like tall stories and is always ranting about some crazy thing. And we need those characters, And again, David Icke isn't an important social figure as far as I'm aware, in terms of his influence in the UK is on a very small sort of group of people who are, I don't know, I imagine, I don't know, just sort of conspiracy theory type of people, which I don't like using the term really, because I think half of those things are kind of true. And, David Icke has kind of revealed quite a lot of like true stuff. David Icke was talking about Jimmy Savile, which is one of the things that we bring up. And David Icke was talking, he is highlighting stuff about power that, as I say, I view it as a poetic expression. I don't know enough. So if there is specifically some anti-Semitic literature that David Icke has produced, or things where he said, this particular group of people is out to get you or something, I'm not aware enough of his work to say that that's the case. So whatever. And I don't think it's beyond the pale. I think that Norman Finkelstein, during the time that anti-Semitism was being used to demolish Jeremy Corbyn, sort of expressed everything anybody needs to say about anti-Semitism. And again, it's a topic that's personal to me. I don't want to sort of hijack with that particular issue. But the idea that we need to somehow repress any voice that's eccentric, and I don't favor these sort of things, like when Alex Jones was banned from Twitter, or Facebook or whatever, just from the public sphere, the people who were applauding that are all fascists as far as I'm concerned. Because, well, if you don't like what someone like that says, and I don't like the guy at all. I think he's a dickhead, but I don't believe in the idea of depriving him of a voice. I don't believe in depriving anyone of a voice. And what all it is, well, as I say, we are already living in a fascist authoritarian system, and that authoritarian system, since I believe World War II, has managed to conduct itself by using propaganda instead of shooting people and dragging them off to gulags. And as soon as it becomes, well, again, this is stuff that Hugh's gone into in much depth, but they did get Hallam with that as well, and that's insane, right? I mean, exactly the way that I can't even remember. He said something completely innocuous, but yeah, if you just say the J word, you're going to get flayed. And so I think, yeah.
Yeah, and just to say, I'm not accusing David of anything whatsoever, but I are controlled in a
Live
terrible
streaming
way.
is on.
It just kind of notes that this nature of elevation, personality, and public debate over cults itself is part of the problem. It is the expression of that fascistic control. So it's not to say anything about Ike himself, particularly. It's the nature of this thing. Is that control that I think you're speaking of.
So, like, is there? I mean, the thing is, are we? And that this touches on the sort of Hughes narrative about, if the slaves overthrow the plantation owners and then take over the plantation, they're just going to reform the slave system. We know that the survivors of World War II Holocaust went somewhere else and then reformed the Nazi system, essentially. Are we capable of not being? Are we so inculcated in fascism that do we all individually embody fascism in some way? Am I going off topic? Because I've had an experience of being in a fascist state. And I hate these fucking BBC. There's the sketch show, and there's that bloke David Mitchell, and they're in the Nazi. I can't say that in the regalia of the German army of World War II, and he goes, "Oh look, I'm wearing a hat with a skull and crossbones on it," and blah blah blah. Are we the bad guys? I'm sure everybody knows this clip. Are we the bad guys, right? And I've had that experience of going, are we the bad guys? And discovering that, yes, we are the bad guys. And, to what extent are we sort of like fascists all the way down? Are we all fascists?
Yeah, I think a big part of the problem is that we learned all the wrong lessons from the World War II experience. We're kind of hypersensitive about certain ethnic groups and stuff, and that you're not allowed to even make a sentence using a word pertaining to that tribe. That's kind of the wrong lesson we learned, I think, and the real lessons that we should have learned is that, as David also says, that there are very few fascists in the world. They have followers, and the thing we are doing wrong today is that we are letting ourselves be followers of the European Union, followers of our national leaders in Canada, followers of Justin Trudeau, who is taking away everybody's human rights, who is freezing bank accounts for everybody who donated to the trucker protests. So the mechanism of a fascist takeover is that you have some very few people who are, these days they are more like center politics, center fascists. They have their very anti-freedom ideas, but politically they're like sort of passive aggressive people in a centrum-ish political party, but they have no regard for human freedom or for a true diversity of opinions and stuff, right? And so everybody is scared by these diseases, these wars, and the propaganda creatures they're making. You know, like in America, they're making this this big scare about white nationalism or whatever, which is to my attention anyway. It's a very based on very thin group of facts. You know, it's kind of the kind of creating something out of nothing and trying to get everybody scared of that. So I think we are very, very unprepared to stand up against the fascism of the 2020s. And I do agree with those of you who said that we are more or less living in de facto fascist states already in large parts of the world. And these days they don't use the same brutal physical tools that they used 80 years ago, but that's only because they do not have to. It's only because they perfected the German invention of television and radio, other media, because they apply dirty black propaganda, and therefore they don't have to, you know, go out and police everybody and arrest people in Nacht und Nebel, arrest people at night and take us away to camps and stuff. Yeah, but you have seen over the past years, you have actually seen concentration camps going up in several countries, in Australia, etc. And they're kind of just waiting for the right moment, the right situation to start using them again. And yeah.
Well, these facilities in the UK where they're putting people, you know, the gangs of Albanian desperate men who've come over here in dinghies to rape our women and sign on and collect benefits and use the NHS or whatever it is, overwhelming our borders. Those awful people are being, well, some of them are either being put in, they're all, the media shows these two things. You've got these like detention camps, which do, for all intents and purposes, are concentration camps. And let's not forget that the British invented concentration camps. Was it Churchill himself? Or it was certainly something that was introduced, I think, in South Africa during the Boer War. I'm not good on the history, so if anybody can correct me, please do. But we've got these camps and these terrible people coming to our country. Are, as I say, some of them are being put in these camps and being treated really horrifically. But then these other people apparently are being put in hotels and having free hotel accommodation with full room and board at the expense of the British taxpayer. So yeah, I'm not sure what the story is, but yeah, I've sort of grown up with this idea that the model of the full sort of fascist dictatorship with people being dragged away in the night is the natural state of human civilization, and I'm only assuming that there'll be maybe they're not even aware of it, you know. But I think that the whoever it is who's in charge is kind of prepping for that scenario, and it's just a matter of time before, if the propaganda doesn't work anymore, then you're going to get jackboot thugs with guns on the streets and people being dragged away in the night. So the only difference between the kind of fascist state that I live in and the sort of, you know, 1940s Germany model is that the fascist state that I live in, they've I don't know, they've got their mask on or whatever the terminology is. They haven't taken their gloves off yet, whatever is the appropriate wording there. You know, they're being nice because it's a bit easier. And again, you think it's sort of like the ruling class. I don't know how enjoyable it was for them if you were a senior person in Germany or in Spain or in Italy during the times of, you know, explicit authoritarianism, I sort of take it that maybe it's a bit more a relaxed atmosphere, living in the kind of fascist state that I live in right now, and not living in the state where you've got the sort of Gestapo sort of thing and roadblocks in the street and all. But then as I'm saying that, it occurs to me there's probably a contingent in the ruling class that would really get their rocks off in living in that sort of environment. But yeah, it's all, yeah, I think that's one of those things that Hugh's original talks about, the subject of how, you know, Germany's been sort of setting Turkey up to be sort of to, I don't know, get all unpleasant on the refugees that they've got there. I don't know, I'm drifting off now. Mick, are you going to save me?
Yeah. Can I jump in? Unless DB wanted to say something about this, because I'm going to go to the second point that Cornfield had mentioned, which was about goals. Okay, DB doesn't want to say anything. So, yeah, basically, and this includes this point about dealing with fascism, whether you believe you live in a fascist state or not, is that, you know, that perhaps if you can align your goals to some good thing in the future, I think going south, you mentioned about adopting, you know, a river watershed or something like that, or a forest, and then you go about trying to protect that, right? Then you can live in a place but not be part of the political regime, right? And can you still hear me? Yeah. Okay, thanks. That basically that, you know, that you don't have to be part of what's going on. You know, there might be bad things going on, or you might perceive them to be unfair or whatever. But it's possible if you say, you know, if I adopted or bought some land in Ireland with a river in it and with some trees in it, that I'd protect it over time to keep it natural, right? And try to, you know, ensure that there's fish swimming in the river, you know, that there's some river pearl oysters or whatever they are, you know, etc. Like that, you can still, so you're living in the country, but you're not part of the system, and you're living in the right way to hopefully see where we have a world with green places in the future, if and when it comes that global industrial civilization collapses. So I'll put that to you.
Yeah, that reminds me, because we were going to talk about the Green King, King, what's his name? King Charles, also, and you know, the king and the royal family, they also own a lot of land. For instance, they own the land or the sea floor where you have offshore wind farms and stuff. So he stands to actually gain from that. And I researched a little bit about King Charles, what he's been up to before he became king, and it does seem it seems to be the case that he is using these Bermuda and these offshore tax havens to invest royal money in different kinds of companies that are trying to profit from, what do you call it, carbon credits. So he's trying to position himself to become even more of a billionaire from the Green New Deal, you know, from the so-called alternative energy solutions. So he's going to, you know, if this is true what they say, he's going to profit off of everybody using energy and the trading of carbon credits.
So you're kind of saying he's you could perceive him to be green, but at the end of the day, he's working under the current paradigm of capitalism, which in the end will destroy everything we have anyway. So indeed, it's really not green.
Yeah, it's like Greta says about COP26. Everybody inside those halls, or inside these meeting rooms, are greenwashers, and it's like different corporations trying to compete about being the greenest, and they're all in there to make money. And the same that goes for King Charles, the Green King. Goes for the
Yeah.
whole corporate and state equals fascist world order, that they want to, pretend to the people that they are going to solve this for us, but in behind the curtain they're just going to count their money like they always do, and not because they're from the tribe in the Middle East, but because they are greedy bastards, right?
Yeah, I actually think you're raising a really good point. So, along with the goal of protecting habitat, you would also have to work in a way that isn't, that is anti-capitalistic. I mean, at the same time, we have to survive in the system. You can't totally separate yourself from the system. I mean, what was that film about the guy who tried to live out in Alaska or somewhere like that? You're still going to have to buy food or some essentials in shops and stuff like that, but without profiting from the approach of having a green future, reaching a green future for when after the collapse happens.
Yes, absolutely. I think you could. I think you could say that the true evil that we're trying to find out about, the true evil, I think I would have to say, is the corporations and the governments who are now pretending to be green and pretending to solve the climate and eco crisis, but they are only doing it in order to tighten their grip on everybody. They have no intentions of solving the problem that civilization has created. So they're doing it, they're lying to you and giving you false hope that this is a situation that they can solve for us, but they're doing it, for all the wrong reasons, to get more money, more power, less freedoms, and more tyranny for everybody. So I think that's where you need to have the big sign of evil over them, and not over innocent people like Greta, or great activists and heroes, according to many, like Roger Hallam.
But
Bob, have you got something to say about the king?
Not really. I think what I was just thinking, we need to get a T-shirt with like our heroes: Roger Hallam, Greta Thunberg, and David Icke. That would raise some eyebrows. But yeah, I don't. First of all, I won't use the K word to describe this Charles Windsor fellow. I don't want to even, sort of create that energy of referring to those people or use any of those sort of titles. I haven't really followed the royal family. It's an alien. They've got to me. It's an alien concept for me to engage in any kind of to give them any attention. I think that they are up to their necks. They're a criminal organization of some sort. I think that I don't know actually. Do we have to use coded language to describe what the brother of Charles Windsor's got up to with a certain bloke called Epstein, who didn't work for certain intelligence organizations, and they're a bunch of criminal pedo gangsters, aren't they? And so I don't really take them very seriously. The notion that Charles Windsor could possibly have any capacity to act in the interests of humanity in general, or the British public, I mean, it's just absurd. It's just such an absurd idea. I wouldn't give it any time. And it's always been at the heart of so-called conspiracy thinking, you know, how talking about what was it? His father was he the head of the Freemasons or something? Yeah, I don't know. I just, you know, they're obviously sort of dark and they're negative. They're negative people. So yeah, and I just find, again, it's one of those things that just is an immediate indicator to me that the general public is just beyond redemption, because even sort of fairly sensible, progressive-minded people will talk about how Charles is interested in the environment or interested in social issues or something like this. It's just absurd, you know. I don't have anything remotely insightful to say about the royal family on any level. You know, they're just a bunch of criminals.
Yeah, I would guess that he's been used as a tool, you know, much more than Greta has been, according to her accusers. I think Prince Charles has been used as a tool because in many of those decades when he was a prince, he was kind of the more or less the only voice talking about the planet and ecology and stuff, because you know everybody else were so thoughtless or mindless, I think. So you had like David Attenborough and Prince Charles for many years.
But I don't remember
Basically.
Attenborough ever saying anything about the environment. I remember all those fucking documentaries with the sweeping vistas of this and the lesser
Yeah.
spotted hoo-ha from the African jungle tweeting or something and whatever. And I don't ever remember watching any of those documentaries and the bloke saying, and we're fucking this all, until maybe
Oh,
more
that's right.
recently. I always found it unbearable to watch those programs because there was always this sense of this, like, oh, you know, this imperial pith helmet wearing middle class twit or class twit.
No, I agree. I agree totally. It's only the past couple of years when he's done things together with Greta and stuff. But when it comes to the Green King, I think you know, the plotters and everything, they've been sort of setting him up to be this kind of Green King, basically, and he's going to lead us into the promised land of lithium batteries and wind farms, right? And of course, he's been planning for how to profit immensely from that role, you know, by knowing from the Bilderbergs or other organizations, from knowing how the future is planned out to be, then he can position himself, you know, with some relatives who have stocks in these funds in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda that also control this company that takes money from every carbon tax transaction, right? So I think he's, you know, he's been sort of quiet about the environment and climate for the first month of his reign, but I think it's going to come back hard after, let's say, after Christmas, after the New Year, and it's going to be sort of the human face of the new green fascism, the new green merger of state and corporation.
He'll be the King of London as we sort of Hunger Gamesify the world, you know, and the British people. And the British people will, you know, as they're returned to their sort of rightful peasant status, crawling around in the mud like a Monty Python scene, bloviating about this, that, and the other. Well, I shouldn't say they, because I'm one of them, I suppose. But you know, we'll all be sort of like scrabbling around in the mud looking for a morsel, and then you'll have this chap, you know, whatever, proclaiming, I don't know, what's he going to do? Ride around in an electric gold-plated chariot, proclaiming that we are saving the planet, you know, by turning all of the British people into peasants, you know, digging in the dirt for some sort of whatever fucking root vegetables might grow here for half the year. I think this episode's triggering. This is the episode title going south if you want to. Bob is triggered by anti-Semitism and royalty.
Oh,
Well, let's
speaking.
yeah. I was just going to say, let's hear from DB and the people who haven't talked so much. Let's the DB first. Yeah.
Okay. So people in my family are all basically right-wing conservative Christians, and I chat with them occasionally on these kind of topics. Mostly my brother, who's pretty much an outright fascist. Um, it's interesting for me because I do it to kind of understand their psychology, like what's going on. So, for instance, there's the globalist thing, which, yeah, that's true. And he thinks it's just the Jews. That's what he thinks it is. And he thinks that if you get rid of them or overthrow them, then everything will be peachy keen and you can have a kind of nationalism in America. And that's just manifestly false because it's not necessarily the people in charge. I mean, they're criminals, obviously, the banksters are, but it's the social relations that they're not seeing. So the conservatives are doing the individualist thing where they're pointing fingers at specific people, which yeah, they're criminals, but that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is, the social relations of like the clock expecting, returns on investments, predictability, wage slavery, money, all that is the problem. And so you try to explain that, but the thing is they think that shit's good. The conservatives think that shit's good. They want that to stay. And so that is the break, I think, between like the anarchist kind of left point of view and then the conservatives or the right wing is the right wing doesn't want, the tech civ to go away. They don't want the wage slavery to go away. They just think that if they get their little nationalism cut off from the rest of the world, then everything will be peachy king. But it's like, no, you still have an authoritarian government. You have most of the people still disenfranchised, but they don't mind that. It's like as long as we get our cheap gasoline, it'll be a-okay. It's like no, you have to abolish time. You have to get rid of currency holding precedence over everything, including life, which is an abomination. And so the right wing conservative fascist types don't see that at all. So that's the breaking point. Is basically those people are for the machine, and I don't think they're going to change. And that's the breaking. That's the break there. That's the problem.
Can I ask you, DB, the fact that you're informed? So, I think there's very little difference between the left and the right. They're just two different colors of paint. But the fact that you're informed and, you have another view or another story, are you living that alternative story?
What do you mean?
I mean, like, you know, the somehow trying to live of global industrial civilization or capitalism, whatever you want to call it, or you're still stuck within the machine, but you're informed of the left and right agenda, which really is with the machine that you're against.
Yeah, I mean, when I say left and right, I'm using those terms very loosely. Like I've seen, if you consider like Democrats left, then yeah, that's a total abomination. Like that's gonna go nowhere. Yeah. I think abolishing the time constraints and the currency system goes beyond left and right for sure. Yeah.
Mick, I thought your question was really interesting, and I wonder if it kind of harkens back to what you were saying before about trying to get separation from the system, living in the society, but not participating in it. And, my reaction back then too was that, and I think it's a fine thing to strive for, of course, but, any Native American will tell you they're going to come for you. This is a system designed to target and steal, so there's no way to really get yourself out of that potential threat. Certainly living inside of it, you can try to hide or try to disconnect as much as you can, but they will, it's a system designed to come for you, especially if you're not fueling it. But I kind of wanted to answer too, I'm trying much as I can. I think one thing to do is to live in desperate poverty, just trying to adjust to some kind of approach to the world that is more realistic with regard to our resources and energy use. Trying to avoid the kind of hierarchical and hierarchy forming relationships that are through banking and through traditional work, through time, like Divine Beast mentioned. Trying to create authentic relationships with people around you that are based on mutual exchange, not predatory exchange. But it cannot be done fully, as you live in this context. We're just going to see how this thing winds down on its own, in my view. But that's kind of my approach to what you were describing earlier in your question also. I just think it's interesting.
Oh, okay, that's kind of what you're asking. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, so when it comes to my approach to life in this prison is basically, I mean, it took a while after I kind of had a mental breakdown in the Air Force and concluded that pretty much the society is completely, wrong. I decided that I needed to kind of find a space of escape. And what I've tried to do is arrange everything to give me as much leisure time as possible. That's pretty much all I can do. I have no fantasies of going out in the bush and surviving. I would prefer if we all tried to get that knowledge back, but I don't think it's realistic. So, I've just tried to skirt wage slavery as much as possible, avoid contracts. Like I don't have a car, for instance. And I just minimally keep my rent paid and my food. I just get food, and then I spend the rest of my time either outside watching animals at the park or painting. Yeah, like in 2018, I mentioned when I started, and when I decided, I've always done this on and off. It's kind of my destiny to do this, even as a child. So I just put my foot down, dedicated myself, and right when I did that, like a few weeks later, I found Hugh's videos on YouTube. They were recommended to me, like the algorithm throws me relevant stuff now and then. It's really interesting, but yeah, like, yeah, it's, living as minimalistically as possible, but as for what it'll accomplish, it's like, it's a better life than just resignating, giving up on your dreams. Like, I mean, dreams, some people have dreams that can't be attained, like fame and glory and all that. But if you have simple dreams of just painting or doing normal human stuff, you can do that. Like I think you could arrange it um to have that opening in your life. But um it's also that whole thing of what Nietzsche said with amor fati, love your fate. Like I don't think I'm gonna survive the collapse of the system. Like it'd be cool if I did. That'd be kind of awesome. But um I just don't worry about that because that's in the hands of the fates. I know the future is probably going to be ugly. I don't see the society changing for the better at all. So, I've just done the best I can to have a little spark of freedom in my life, and that's it.
And I would say, I'm new at this practice, I think, but as I've kind of given up my hope that striving against climate or striving against the civilization is really going to play out, what I've noticed is just the beauty and joy of living has kind of rushed in from the edges. And that's really amazing. If I'm not worried about trying to have a better house, how much more I can enjoy life, which is really fantastic. So I think there's a lot of value in that, but this is my concern sometimes with some approaches of XR and Greta or the Green King. They're kind of leading people to the wrong solutions, potentially fueling the worst opponents we have and wasting our precious time when there's no real way to spread this message in the system. But maybe the best thing to do is to divest you know, to quit on the job and to just just deprive it of resources. But I don't have hopes that's gonna be effective though, but I find it valuable.
From the chat, from the YouTube chat, there is a guy called Keith Hayes, and he's telling us that there is going to be a DGR event, Deep Green Resistance, on the 19th, I think, and he is promoting it at his site called chasingthesquirrel.com, where there are articles and also a video, I think, about the event. So that's if you're in America. Facebook event. Okay, whatever. I'm not sure what it is. I thought it was some kind of big sabotage event or something. Okay, whatever.
That's not a functioning.com, as far as I can tell, unless that's sort of. Can Keith, can you post an actual URL?
He can't post a URL because YouTube swallows it. The YouTube chat is auto deleting every URL.
Well, I can't seem to find the thing. If anybody else can help. Yeah, sorry, man, I'm none the wiser. Can you post it to the subreddit or something?
I found it. I'm gonna post it in the chat, the link.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I just like to thank Divine Beast and Cornfed there for some beautiful words. And actually, it brought me on to another point I was going to raise about when the collapse comes and about facing it. Would one consider themselves lucky to be facing into that situation? But maybe it's a step too far to talk about.
well, are we sort of in the collapse at the moment? It's not sort of hit everybody yet, or whatever. I feel I'm in a very privileged position, but at the same time, we're sort of. I feel like I'm in for more of a shock than people in sort of areas that are more in a more advanced stages of collapse. And like Cornfed was saying, well, it sounds to me like you, Cornfed and DB, are sort of both talking about the same idea of like having the least possible interaction with the society that we're in. Yes, we have to sort of do what we do to get by and participate in society and pay the rent and so on and so forth. But yeah, the idea of actively trying, yeah. Well, I put it in the chat, you know, John Michael Greer's little motto of collapse now and avoid the rush. It is a very good idea. Sometimes I think I minimize my own lifestyle in a similar way to what DB's describing.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, from my own perspective, I'm looking at myself, and it's more along the lines of what the likes of Mark Boyle is doing. I thought his book, The Way Home, kind of describes it. You know, living in the countryside on a lot less than when you interact with the full regalia of modern society.
Sorry, did you say you're in the Mark Boyle gang then, or as in, are you pursuing a similar?
Not really. I met him. I've met him, but I've read his book, and that type of thing. I'm from the countryside anyway. I mean, I'm still kind of normie engineering background, but I realise I'm informed of what's going on, and I see that there's the political situation is not going to get us out of this. So basically, it's kind of the way home. Following what he says in the way home, and also what you just said there in the chat. Collapse now and avoid rush.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know if you've followed some of the conversations where this has been a sort of topic. I mean, also when Hugh was alive as well, the idea of the types of people who are, I guess, already somewhat compatible with that sort of lifestyle, or that can lean in that direction, who are more outdoorsy. There was, unfortunately, our comrade Gary isn't around at the moment, but he was like very much a city dwelling person. I'm very much a city dwelling person. I think some of the other participants are sort of tied to the city, and then there are other people. Hugh was living on a boat, obviously. Going south is out in sort of in wilderness adjacent existence, if I understand correctly. Sophie, who's not here today, unfortunately, is again in the wilds of Ireland. And yeah, the contrast between those two sort of positions of getting away from it all and being stuck in the middle of it thing is something I'm very interested in. I keep thinking about whether I should try and escape the city. The city's going to get very unpleasant, I think, sooner possibly than later. But I'm somebody who's very much not of the countryside, and I don't know how easy it would be to adapt to the sort of lifestyle and sort of self-reliance as someone who's probably takes about 45 minutes to change a plug.
That reminds me of the movie Whitnell and I. Have you seen that, Bob?
Yes, indeed. It's obligatory.
Yeah, because Whitnell and I, they are forced out into the countryside and living in a cottage or their family or something. And then one of them comes back with a little lump of something, and the other one asks, "What's that?" It's the fuel and wood situation. It's like if you have two very artsy London guys trying to survive in this Scottish wilderness or whatever, and everything is just damp and wet and it's raining all the time, and you're supposed to find something to burn or something to eat or whatever. It's a very good. It's actually a very good kind of collapse movie, because imagine yourself after the collapse and London is down the drain and stuff, and you're trying to survive. Two kind of what do you call it, art students or whatever. Who have no technical skills or anything. Yeah.
Well, I think now and certainly into the future, we're all going to need teammates and friends. Everyone's own decisions all depend on their own personal goals. I don't think anyone's going to make it through, but for me, I just want to try to be as ethical and try not to do as many bad things as possible. But I'm in a somewhat urban setting regardless. I don't know. It's just this tough situation. But I appreciate you sharing the name of that essay. I'll have to look into that.
There's a question. There's a comment on the YouTube chat about we are in collapse. Yes, I think Bob asked everybody if we are in collapse. So I think I agree with Sophie and Bob that we're in collapse, but there are stages, and the one very sort of visual stage that we will come to is when there is no more electricity in the sockets, and also when there is no opening hours in the local store, when you can no longer buy food. So we're clearly not at that stage just yet, but that's kind of locally, wherever you live, the week that the electricity goes away for good, and the week that the shops stop selling you food for good, not opening any time again. Those are kind of hard collapses, hard wall. You hit the hard wall,
But
I think.
so we're just going back to what maybe, well, my parents were quite old when they had me, but we're going back to basically times of pre-electricity. It's not, to us it's a collapse, but actually we're simplifying, like somewhat Nate Higgins talks about, back to something that was existent in the past anyway. So it doesn't, it was possible to live in. It should be possible for us to adapt and live like that again.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's whenever I talk to anybody about the collapse thing, the normies who kind of can't conceive of living in a world where you can't just jump in the car and go to McDonald's. And I say, well, look, obviously the human species has lived 300,000 years like that, and it's only the last 200 years that a certain proportion of us can jump in the car and go to McDonald's with an iPhone. So yeah, it makes, what you're saying is, it's true. At the same time, having lived in this civilization all of my life, it could be just an alien planet living in this sort of pre-electricity era. And I've had some, I've lived in a sort of third world setting for a period of time, and I feel like I've got some idea of what it might be like to have at least an intermittent relationship with the accoutrements of civilization, insofar as hours long power cuts because the electricity distribution system doesn't work properly, and living in an environment where you have seasonal food. So for 3 months of the year, there's only 3 types of vegetables you can get, and having fuel shortages, and then all of this sort of stuff. So living within a sort of chaotic sort of what sort of might be the state of London in a few years, possibly, or maybe next week. But yeah, the idea of then having to adapt to literally, I don't know, are we all going to be made to go and dig onions out of the ground? Which, again, is fair enough if that needs to be done, or whatever, like the idea of just going back to, I haven't been there, so I wouldn't personally be going back to, but to adopt a lifestyle, which again, I think 80% of the world's population have, we're well, speaking for myself anyway, a member of very rich society of people, and even at the bottom of that society, I live this ridiculous lifestyle that doesn't correspond with anything. And yeah, like Indians, they're all we're just living what's normality for a lot of people already now, isn't it? But that's one of the things that I find a bit absurd about this whole discussion of this predicament anyway, because we're like the spoiled rich kids sort of going, oh, mommy and daddy are going to take the sweets away, blah, 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 when we're surrounded by starving orphans.
Back to what Mick said, I think Norway, where I was born, and Ireland are pretty similar in many ways. We had in an earlier episode, we talked about how I think both Greece and Ireland and Norway have gone from a farmers, pretty poor society, and into this filthy rich post-industrial society of today. So I'm old, so I remember living without power, without electricity. Not at home, but at the cottage where we went in the Easter and the winter. So we had a cottage without electricity, as far as I can remember, anyway. So we had no electricity and no, water and water closet at the cottage. And I can still remember when we finally got electricity and water. and I remember it felt like a stupid thing, a stupid idea, because to me anyway, because sort of the charm of going to the mountain to the family cottage to go skiing is that it's different from home. It's different from back home in the relative luxury houses and stuff that we lived in. So there are so many things that we today think of as primitive or terrible and blah blah blah, but it's actually very very cozy and nice to have candles and to chop wood for the winter, chop wood for the Easter holiday and stuff. Prepare things that are going to lie out in the shed and dry up, so that you can use the wood 1 or 2 years later. And we also have this, this oven with the rings on top that you can cook meals and stuff on on a wood stove in a way. You can, heat water for coffee and stuff on that wood stove. And I remember when that was very old, and the people in my family wanted to throw out the old wood stove, and I said, no, you can't do that, that's stupid. What are you going to do if you come here in Easter and you're up here to go skiing with all of the family, 3 generations, and then there is a power out? What are you going to do then when you don't have the wood stove? And of course, somebody in my family answered, no, but then we just drive back to the city, then we don't go skiing. And I thought, that doesn't sound very resilient. If you can't even be here for 2 or 3 or 4 days without electricity. So just keeping some of those things and some of that equipment that we had before electricity just makes everybody more resilient, and it makes for more options, when things happen, when there's a storm and the power goes out or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that keeping those practices is so important. And I don't know why I always feel called to balance things, but I think it's worth mentioning, of course, that simply returning to those ways is an important thing for us to keep our eyes on, but at the same time, it's not going to happen so cleanly. Our total caloric budget is near to be decimated, and that means food production across the globe as well. Thinking about going back to these ways of life, a lot of people aren't going to make it. They may not have the know-how or the kind of ability to form social relationships, or even just the physical capacity to do this sort of thing. That transition is going to be very abrupt, and our denuded landscapes are not going to offer as much firewood as they did in the past, and our decimated ecosystems are not going to offer as much wild forage as they should. That's a challenge, but for what any one person does, I think that's it's important to be as robust and anti-fragile as possible, to the degree you're interested in surviving. So whatever that's good for. But it's too bad we went this way. I think that the question is, are we already in collapse? And, there's a lot of ways to think of this. Many of them have been discussed, but yeah, the system that we're in is based on consumption. It's based on destroying something to eat it. And this is happening all over the place in different stages, in different ways. As each of us in our own locales, as you look at the governance or the civilization or the system, what is it destroying and eating? Right now, in the US, it seems like we're about destroying Russia and Ukraine and consuming its resources, and vice versa. Same thing is happening from the other side, or at least a struggle to avoid that. But the thing, as it runs out of external fuel, turns inward and looks for things inside a society to destroy and consume. And certainly in the US, that's something we've been on that path for some time now, a couple decades, and it should quicken, and I don't know how it is elsewhere, but That's the thing I think to watch out for the fascism and being able to kind of retreat to the hills or wherever. You know, how much is the internal consumption occurring?
Yeah, it's good to be balanced, cornfed. Thank you. I think I can double it with a double balance. Maybe I will try anyway. You know, it's of course a very serious issue with collapse and the huge reduction in population and people, you know, dying and not being a part of it anymore. But we also have to balance it, you know, in the spirit of eco-philosopher Arne Næss, for instance, from Norway. We have to balance that with all the species we're losing just during this chat, you know, all the plant and animal species we're losing just during this chat of an hour or two. And you have and just unimaginable destruction that comes from just another day of industrialism on this planet. So it's not like nobody or nothing is dying in huge numbers today, and then suddenly in 5 years or something, a lot of people will be dying. There is terrible suffering and species going into extinct happening and has been happening for 50 years, and it goes faster and faster. And you also have these kind of nested or connected extinctions where some kind of fly or bee or whatever disappears forever, and then 10 or 20 species of flowers or whatever, and birds who eat those bees or flies, they can't live without that fly. It's kind of like a human sorrow, emotional sorrow, but it's just physical because they evolved together, and without those ants or insects or plants or flowers or whatever, a huge number of others also go away. So this is what we want to, you know, to keep as much as we can, and on the scales, on the balance, it's like, are we really so happy about this civilization that we are willing to risk everything that ever lived on the planet? I say no.
Yeah, I totally agree there. think I don't think any bit of this is worth burning down the web of life for at all. Nothing. Like I did recently come across another doomer person on the internet. We had a great conversation. I told them um the extent to where, abstraction has taken over. Like I would take every image that humans have made of a wolf in all of history and burn it down to save one wolf that has 1 hour of life left. That's how much I think life is more important than all these things we have created.
Yeah, agreed on both. It's just incredible, how we other something, symbolize it all along the way to destroy it.
Yeah, and it's sad to see that people don't like a lot of people don't understand the limits of these symbols. Like if you go out and actually experience being near animals, you realize, for instance, that like at the park I mostly see birds. We don't understand jack shit about birds. We really don't. We have no fucking idea what's going on.
It's always hilarious to me when, there's some, and I appreciate these people, but some ornithologist researcher or something that, new science, we understood that birds can talk to each other. Big surprise.
Yeah, it's I mean, I feel like that science like is way behind on that. Like it was patently obvious to me even as a child that animals have minds and they're communicating. And yeah, growing up in the Christian hellscape that I did, like the Christians literally think that oh, animals are just put here for us to eat. No, they're not. I mean, we eat, of course, we have to hunt and eat, but that does not mean that their existence is for us to eat them. That is totally fucked up worldview.
Yes, it's a kind of human trick or a societal trick to to take away the feelings and other properties of our prey, of the things that we are going to eat. We've been doing that for centuries. To say that fish don't have feelings, and I would guess that before that they would probably say that animals, like cows and sheep, don't have feelings. So it's kind of just a trick to make it easier for the children to eat the meat or something. I don't know, but we're doing it all the time, and almost every time you see somebody, some professor or whatever, or some pundit say that these animals slash plants don't have this and that, you can just be sure that they do. You just haven't figured it out yet. How to do it. Even trees and forests can talk to each other about important things for them. About the insect attacks and stuff through the roots and through the mucils or something, mushrooms on the roots.
Yeah, and I think that those sorts of people with that mindset don't realize that they're just doing an assault on their own intelligence too. Like, because I feel like the human brain, if it is anything, is a kind of an amplifier of all the intelligence that's happening on the planet. And yeah, in civilization, we're just burning it all. We're just burning it down. And it's no wonder in that case that because what's